Welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. Today we're continuing to talk about family and its implication to our overall wellness. I have two very good friends of mine, Sebastian, a returning podcast guest, and his wife, Chantal. Both of them attend the same church that I attend today, and they have been a great blessing in my life, and I'm just happy that they were able to come and join us. The one thing that's interesting is that this podcast will be uploaded on Thanksgiving, which is kind of how it works every Thursday. So it will be uploaded on Thanksgiving. So people who are listening will be listening on Thanksgiving and after. So we're going to be talking about family. Thank you again, Chantal and Sebastian, for agreeing to be on.
Robert.
Thank you for inviting us.
So as November continues to get closer, we're reminded of how family plays a big role. And sometimes that's not always the most... We like to remember that like our safe place, but not everyone's story about family is the same. So we're going to talk about that. But before I begin, I always like to start with a disclaimer. I know that there's people out there who are struggling right now, especially all that's going on. Those who are in crisis, I encourage you to seek out appropriate professional help. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is 1-800-273-8255. I do encourage you to find out what is locally in your area. I know that there's virtual support groups and there's other resources that may be a good fit to help you through this time, because unfortunately holidays could be one of those times that are the hardest for people. So I always begin with a quote, and Sebastian knows this, and this is the quote, and I'm going to just I try to just let you, I'll repeat it if you need it. It says, "Other things may change us, but we start and end with family." Anthony Brandt. Okay, so Sebastian, how about you go first? Share what you think. What do you, when you hear that, what comes to mind? And then Chantal, you could kind of add after, and I'll share at the end.
Can you repeat it again?
Yeah, it says, "Other things may change us, but we start and end with the family."
Mm. I like the quote. What do you have behind you too? You have the family maintaining wellness through the uncertainty and
And recovery. That's the name. That's the
nice.
theme for the month. So we're
Ah, I
talking about
got you. Yeah,
family. So
right.
and anything you want to share, Sebastian, as we talk about family and this quote.
Yeah, I think it's very true. I mean, obviously, I think we're shaped by our environment, and if not shaped, really impacted greatly by it. And obviously, as you grow, you get older, you leave your home and your house, you develop your own kind of culture and habits. But I'm amazed, even just in our journey as a married couple, how much of our family life and upbringing comes out. All right,
Yeah.
and you become more aware of it, of how you are used to doing things, of what you're used to doing. You know, things simple as like what we eat on certain days or what we do. You know, uh, how we do things, how we communicate. Right. So much of it is just shaped subconsciously by our family. Right, when you're growing up, and so that's why obviously psychology, shares how important those early developmental years are. Right.
Yeah.
For the development of children and stuff. So yeah, it's very important time of life, and I think it's a hard time to it's hard to then break those habits or values, ideas, whatever it is later on. So yeah, family plays a huge I believe role, and even in my role as a pastor in a spiritual sense in a religious setting, it's there's only so much that teachers and preachers and pastors and other leaders can do as compared to what families and parents can do in the home, right? Just the influence and the day in and the day out that you have. So yeah, family, I think, like, very important, and very really makes you who you are, right? Whether for good or bad, and whether you like it or not, you're going to be doing things that your dad or your mom did, or your grandparents, or whoever raised you, and what you learned and what you saw, how they valued and how they viewed others, right? What was the religion, all those things you absorb kind of as a sponge as a child. And so yeah, family really does change you. Obviously you can break that, and if it's bad you can change. There's always that. But yeah.
Chantal, your insight on the quote. I can read it again if you like, but
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, if you can read it again.
it says, "Other things may change us, but we start and end with the family."
I think of it more along of an emotional aspect. I think
Mhm.
of specifically what what brings to mind, what I have bring to my mind is that at the end of the day, you have family, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I think about. You can make new friends, you can go through your different walks of life and learn different things, but at the end of the day, you were born and there was family there, and then when you pass away, there will hopefully be family there. And that's what I think of.
Yeah, when I think about family and all this, it reminds me of, it reminds me of how we see our value. A lot of times we kind of hinge it on the fact that on pleasing others. If I'm not able to do such and such, my value goes down. And for me, being a first generation American, it's very big. I want to be the one who pays back, per se, what my mom or my parents done for me. And for me, what I've learned through my experiences, it brings a level of urgency and a level of in person, because we have to be willing to receive good gifts. Us being Christians, we understand that concept. And one thing I had to learn real quick was my mom and my dad did great things, and I'll never be able to pay them back, and that's okay. We have to be able to receive gifts. It's good to give gifts, but sometimes with families, we don't put those boundaries up and then we kind of limit ourselves, and we say, my value only hinges if I do this for my mom or whoever. And then you get tied up with a lot of urgency, when sometimes just pausing, like when you're able to just process and give yourself that time, that room to one of the most amazing family members or friends in your lives are the ones you can have pie in your face moments.
Right.
You know,
Right.
you can make mistakes and it's not the end of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the ones you want to surround yourself, because
Correct.
if you're on eggshells, it doesn't promote healing. It doesn't promote growth. It doesn't promote, it just, everything you're doing is to do it right the first time. And that doesn't promote a very healthy outlook moving forward, especially into the holidays.
Yeah.
So, you know, maintaining wellness is part of, you know, on the top, it says wellness through uncertainty and recovery. I'm trying to move my head. But a lot of times in my support groups, I facilitate, the common thread and the common stressor is family, especially now. And it's kind of interesting, you know, and you see that in churches too, you know, the group of people we care about the most, who may give us the most special moments in our life, can also bring the most damaging ones too. I have people like that who have been on this podcast, but at the same time, each story is different, and no one's story is less than anyone else's story. So, like for me, I remember with Joanne, my wife now, when we were going through marital counseling, it's just funny how I saw authority. You know, when you talk about God, you know, and in my faith, authority for me was something I really struggled with because of my experiences, versus what Joanne was in a safe environment in the church. I wasn't. I had experiences that were all this. So when I looked at that, so it's very funny how our experiences really kind of promote how we kind of interact with each other. Right. Families are good support, but also they're also fallible to make mistakes. And when we have hurt families, and you've seen them, Sebastian, you've seen them in church, you've seen them around. The problem is when they latch onto that hurt thing, and then that hurt, you can't fix a hurt with another hurt. You can't. If someone's angry at me, I can't get more angry at them to diffuse the anger. It'll just continue to heighten and exponentially grow. When do you this thread of this whole idea of you know, family being like the biggest stressor right now for a lot of people in recovery, a lot of people in general in life, how do you process that the people who give you the most joy can also give you the most pain? And I don't know, who wants to take that first? I'll leave it up. It's just any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can definitely see that, especially with some friends that have told me that like I need to take a break from my family themselves. Like there's just the place, and I think it might come to, I'm going to use an example. I think it comes down to you feeling like you're returning back to a child. So whenever Sebastian goes and visits his family members, I feel like he's like a kid again. Like there was one particular time when we went to the beach and I was like, where's Sebastian? And I just look over and Sebastian's like digging holes and like trying to get inside and like covering himself with the hole. And I'm just like with the sand, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, why? And he's just like, he kind of chills. He's like, oh yeah, can you make that for me? And I'm like, oh, what's going on? And then I realized that it's probably because like he has returned kind of to that like childhood self that he exhibited while he was living with them, which exemplifies like what you say, Robert, about how like it should be your safest space, like to the point where Seb's like literally becomes like a kid again. But sometimes like if you did have moments during your childhood where you felt inadequate, as you were saying, or where you did feel like you were stressed and you felt like you were not achieving what they needed to, then to return back to that space that screams that aura is not the healthiest. So I guess that might be a question for me, is how does one like break from that kind of cycle? Like what are things that someone can do? But we can talk about that some other time.
Sebastian, you want to add? Or
I think it's very true. I mean, you think about it, I don't know if it's just how we were raised, or we're talking about family. You know, we really believe our family, or, you know, if you have spouses, close friends, right? You know, whereas if a random person at work or school, wherever on the road, you know, cusses you out, says you're worthless, says you're dumb, you're like, you don't know me, right? That's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like, you don't know who I am. But
Mm-hmm.
if that comes from your family, right, from your
Mm-hmm.
parents, grandparents, whoever raised you, from close friends that are like, no, this is not, you know, it can really hurt you. So it's great, like you were saying, right? The people closest to you can really be the ones that hurt you the most because you really take their word for matter of fact, right? Whereas other people, you don't really give them that space because they're not privy to that intimacy and to that um, able to speak into your life in that way, right? And so I think, yeah, that can definitely happen. I think too, I mean, many times in this same vein, you don't have high expectations of others because you're like, oh, we're not blood family, so I know you're
Yeah.
gonna fail.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you're you always have that staple illustration, right? The father promises to make the tree house for the son or the
Yeah.
daughter, and he never comes through. And that's like, whereas if someone else would have, an uncle or someone else, it's just I feel like the closer someone is to you in that intimacy level, and when they do things that disappoint you, right? That can be a really big disappointment. That can really scar you for life, right? Because you see your dad as someone that can't keep his word.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you expect a lot more from those closer to you. And when those expectations are high and they have this access to you because of intimacy, and they then do something or say something that really hurts you, that can be almost the end of the world, in your sense, right? But at the same time, I mean, we don't want to be just negative, but in the positive side, right? It's those closest that really know you, right? As Chantal was saying, right? When I can go
Mm-hmm.
home and it's just a weird element. I don't know if you felt that already, Robert, as you've been married, but I go home and I feel like I'm back in high school. I'm like, it's just
Mm-hmm.
weird. Yeah, I guess it's just because I think it's more of the location, right? It's my old house, my
Mm-hmm.
old room. So it just kind of takes you back.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but it's nice because those people that really know you can really speak into your life, and you can fake it, right? To everyone else. But when you get home or you talk to your mom on the phone or your dad or your siblings or your best friend, they know the tone of voice that you're speaking with, and you're like, hey, what's going on? They're like, oh, nothing. He's like, no, I know something's up. Tell me what's going on. Right. So there's benefits when it's great, when the relationships are healthy, when people are able to be differentiated, when people are able to be confident in themselves and loving first before they're being judgmental, and when they're able to say, hey, what is it, laissez fires, hands off approach, where it's like, I'm not trying to govern your life. I think it's a great family can be amazing, but at the same time, when it's not that, family
Yeah.
can, I don't want to say it can be a detriment, but it can be really hard to be a part of a family that
It could be a big, the funny thing is, as a facilitator for NAMI and also for the drop-in center, and I found that family could be the biggest stumbling block to recovery, and that's strange, isn't that funny? The people who are the closest could be the biggest stumbling block to them moving forward in
Wow.
their recovery.
Wow.
For me, it makes sense in a weird way because we are the most vulnerable to the ones closest to us. That's why it hurts the most.
Yes, definitely.
One thing that I remember talking last year, I had to go through some trauma therapy around this time. I remember that, and I was going a couple times, and one of the things I've learned was I can't help everyone, and that's okay. That's a crazy thought. And for me, it was hard. It was hard to even get to say those words because, unfortunately, some people are not here today, and the guilt that was weighted on my shoulders. Funny thing, Chantal, the reason I even did the therapy that way, because I went to therapy, was because I knew me and Joanne was getting serious. That was it. I didn't want to bring that baggage over. I knew that I was broken. I used to say I'm a little broken, but I knew that there was something, some family, some trauma, something that I went through that I wanted to get a little bit better at, a little bit better handle, so it wouldn't bleed into our relationship as it was growing and prospering. So, as a family, when I think of family, I look at that. I look at the time. I remember my brother mentioning in the wedding, um,
Mhm.
my friend who got in a car accident in high school, and I remember going to see him every single um, every single time I could, and just seeing how people were like, "I'm gonna be there for you," and how that died off. I remember just kind of um, um, seeing human nature. I'm not saying it was bad that people. It was, if I was to be honest, it was hard for me to go. and when he did, when things, when he did pass away and everything else, I was just a peace of mind that he's no longer in pain, and that whole family wasn't, and obviously respect to that family. But there's a lot of pain out there when it comes to family, and that's the point. We're going into holiday season. There's a reason why this can be the hardest season for a lot of people. I go into the support groups. What do? We talk about coping. Coping, I find, is like little steps to piecing back the value that you feel you've lost, because it's never lost. Spiritually, as Christians, we have one view that I find is very universal: the idea of gratitude. It's not saying how much you don't have, but saying how much you do have. I don't care what, every single 12-step, NA, any meeting that I've been to, they're all focused on gratitude, and that is pretty funny. And when I look at my reading the Bible and in my own faith, which is part of my recovery story, I see that Jesus came down here to serve, not to be served, because he had to share.
Right.
He would not be able to share if he was being served.
Mm-hmm.
And us as people who are trying to spread hope, and as Revived Ministries tries to spread hope, that's why I'm trying to get people to share. My story might be important to a few, but so is Sebastian. So is yours, Chantal. Everyone's story matters. Maybe Chantal more than you, but
come on, man, Robert. Yeah, maybe Joanne's more than you too. Right?
No, just joking. No. Everyone's stories matters, because in the sense that all of us have our own circles that people confide to. I want to throw a quote. I know I kind of went on the thread, but one quote that I really like, it says, "Everyone needs a house to live in, but a supportive family is what builds a home." Talking about family. Go ahead.
I like that, because when you realize, like right now we're talking about kind of more biological family, I think, but in a sense, friends are family that you chose, right? And so a supportive home might look differently for each individual. And you were saying that during the holidays, we're looking not necessarily like fixing something, but more coping, finding a way to, during the rough times, still try to carry through. And I think one of those big coping mechanisms are having family members that are selected family members that support you, even though they're not blood relatives, that are definitely there to stick with you through the end and through the rough times.
Yeah. How about you, Sebastian? Anything you want to comment on that?
Yeah, when you said that quote again, it reminded me of a quote my aunt had at her house that was, I guess it was, I thought it was comparing house and home, but pretty much it was, home is where the heart is, right? And, a house is, you can do it, but when you have family and those you love in the place, that's a home, right? So, I think just going back to that, right? I think it's striving to be the best. And I think this goes to community and society, but striving to be the best people in your circles, right? Whether that be your family unit, your community, your school, your work, wherever it is that you're placed, right? Trying to be the best you can for those around you, and then that pushing to make a better culture and environment for those around you, that you can be supportive and engaging and loving and all that, so I think it's very important. I mean, like I said, there's so many we love our family. We spend the holidays with them, and they make our lives joyful. Obviously there's challenges and different things that go on because you're dealing with people, but it's just a great way, I think, and even in taking it more to the, I guess, a spiritual sense, right? It's a great way, as you were sharing about sharing in service, it's a great way to really be challenged, right? Because someone comes and, hey, can you serve me, right? They don't say that, but in the way what they're asking for, it's an act of service. And many times I found it that I have a less patience with those that I'm closest to, which is very interesting, right? Because we have this, I guess we grow up, right, with the idea that respect others, they're strangers. I don't know, right? It's this idea of they deserve, to respect them, but when we know people, right, that knowledge and intimacy of them sometimes lowers the need, or so it seems, of being respectful and honoring still.
Yeah.
And so I tend to lose my temper, right? If I do, it's usually gonna be people that I'm closest to, because you feel like you can be the most real with them, right? That's the whole idea.
Yeah.
And so it can be very interesting navigating that, because because of that, knowing you can be the most real, and that can then tend to make you more upset with those that you love and are closest to. That can make it even harder, right, for people to be in those situations. So it really pushes you to be extra loving and extra patient and extra trying to understand and extra holding your tongue sometimes, right, to be able to,
Yeah.
sometimes people unload things on you, and things that are happening, and you're just in the mix of it. So I think, like I said, it's beautiful, and it teaches you a lot about yourself. It teaches you a lot about others.
Yeah.
And then when you then find someone that are in different families and different family units, you see how different you are, and maybe pros that you have in your family that others people don't have, or cons that you think, oh, I wish our family would have done that, right? So
Well, it's just like the idea that you could be in a room full of people and feel alone. Isn't that funny? You could be in the house but not in the home. It's interesting. John Lennon, I bring this story up.
Ooh.
John Lennon, when he was a kid, 5 years old, the teacher asked him, what do you want to be when you grow up? To the class, and everyone's like, astronaut, all firemen, and all this stuff. And John Lennon said, I want to be happy. And the teacher's like, I think you got it wrong. You don't understand. You have to pick a profession. But now, being later in age, I think he got it more right than we like to admit. We just there's this idea with family that there's security, there's safety, and some of my most fondest moments when I felt the safest. You know what I mean? When I was young, And so, anyone want to share about that kind of thread?
About what, being safe or happy?
About being safe, about the idea of what our focus is, what is our priority. Right now is unique. This is the first time after the COVID-19 crisis, and Benjamin Franklin said this: tell me and I'll forget, teach me, I may remember, involve me and I will learn. How do we involve people in this unique environment we live in today? It's incredible how that is. And now, as family, as we head into the holiday season, it's uniquely challenging. I saw my mom, the one in Palm Coast. She's devastated that she can't have Thanksgiving like that. She owns that month, that holiday, and she can't do it. And it's sad because she has a health concern. So there's a lot of that. My brother wasn't able to make the wedding. There's these things, but at the same time,
But you had a good best man, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, he's right there. So anyway, it was when I think about learning and involvement, I want to get a little bit insight. We talk about blood family, and now we're talking about outside, the ones we choose. And then let's talk about our church family. We're in the same church together. It's unique. I tell people who are in our church, we have to check on the people who can't make it to church because they're sitting at home. We may complain that we have to wear a mask or all that, but we have the ability to go. It's easy to look at what you don't have versus what you do have. So, any thoughts on that, Sebastian? Why don't you go first and Chantal after?
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, right? How as you get older, your intimate circle. And I apologize, our dog is chewing on a rubber toy back there, so you can hear her working on it.
It's okay. That's family too.
That's family, right? You gotta good times and the bad times. At least she's not barking or growling. So no, but it's interesting. I've always found it how as you go through your life, your intimate group changes, right? So you look back at your childhood friends, maybe, and obviously your family, your blood family kind of stays the same. But even then, you probably, as you get older, you're not as close as you were to your siblings or family, or maybe you get closer, whatever it is. But even in that we're talking the fictive family, right? Or the fictional family, where they're not blood tied, but they're you've kind of adopted them, hey, as family and into your intimate circles. It really changes as you go, you transition to a different state, a different job, different schooling, different period in life, right? You go from single to maybe in relationship, married, now you have kids, and it's very interesting. So but I think it's very important, right? You alluded to it, right? How, our church family too. I think we all have our silos of family, right? I think of maybe we just name it as a community, right? Where you're like, oh, this is the people I play soccer with on Sundays, right? And I hang out with them once a week. I don't really know them, but as you play more, you get to know them a little more, and there's different levels of intimacy, right? But obviously the church family, I think, is really, it's unique in the sense that you really are taken into, just because you do broad and very diverse activities, right? Whether that be an outing or a worship service, right? You are engaging with people in different parts. And then you're also engaging in people in a very emotional way, right? Because you're connecting with them when they're connecting with God, and spiritually they're pouring out their heart through prayer or through songs, or so it's pretty cool to be able to as you move away from your real life family, right? And maybe move distance wise, or just, like you're saying, right, your situation where you were, just because of COVID, there's just even that distance there. The fact that you can still have a really close circle of family and friends, I think is a big blessing, right? And I think it really helps our emotional health. We really need community. We've talked about this before, right? We're made for community. We're made for others, not just in the sense of ourselves being, it is big for fulfilled, to be able to feel like we're being heard, to be supportive, but also for us to be able to serve others, right? And that's really fulfillment comes from that as well, serving others, being there for others. So being able to do that and find that wherever you are in life, right? I think is a big blessing to be able to, make that your own little family wherever you go, pockets of family all over the world, right? So
how about you, Chantal?
I think piggybacking on that last statement, that pockets of family that you have like all over the world, I think that there are definitely pockets of family that are there for you to feed into, and then for them to feed into you for a certain amount of time, and maybe for a purpose as well. Whereas family is kind of this continuous thing, like always, whether you're close or apart. These friends might be there like for a moment, and then putting also the responsibility on us as well, being intentional about being with those friends as well, and keeping those close relationships that were close once before, and these friendships that probably helped you during a really tough time, and then demonstrating appreciation for that work that they did by continuing to keep in contact with them. I find it really impressive that Sebastian continues to message his childhood best friends. I'm a little bit less consistent than he is, but I call her and we talk, and when we call, it's like we know that we know everything about each. We've known everything about each other for so long, and being kind to those friendships, and being also okay when time of separation happens, when time of individual growth needs to occur, and hoping that you can come back together in a different headspace at a different point, and allow that relationship to grow even stronger and longer.
I like what you said, Chantal, because my friend, he was there. He was the one with the ring bearer. I went to college with him. That guy. And for me, his name is Tristan, and he was there at a vital time where I needed him. He was in my dorm, and I found out that one of my friends from the military committed suicide, and he just talked to me. I didn't know him. I just met him, because we were in the same dorm, and he took the time to listen. Sebastian, we talk about this a lot, about listening. A lot of times it's not about knowing, it's just being present. It's a lot of times we mess it up when we try to, because everyone has their own context. They have their own set of personal experiences that kind of shapes how they see things.
Right.
I could look at the same thing. I could say things to you, Chantal or Sebastian, and you guys will see it very differently. And that's because what you've experienced and where you came from. But as you grow closer, you get to see a little bit more of a different angle of each individual. And then you get to appreciate it.
Yeah.
One of the Rachel Naomi Remen says the most basic and powerful way to connect to another person is to listen. Just listen. Perhaps the most important thing we ever give each other is our attention. A loving silence often has far more power to heal and to connect than the most well-intentioned words. I remember in my previous church in St. Augustine, there was this one guy who was suffering from Parkinson's disease, and I used to go to the VA hospital, and I watched the game with him. I didn't know if he could hear me. I remember it was one of those times, but I remember reading verses of the Bible a little bit, and then watching the game. He couldn't control like the drool and all that stuff, but I was just present. I wasn't trying to fix anything. I'm just reminded how even when I was struggling, people might have saw me that way too, because I was in and out of hospitals before in New Jersey a lot, and I struggled too. And some of the things that I'm just looking back and looking where I'm at right now, I'm just super blessed, of where I'm at, because what I didn't do was not get not just focused on what happened to me. Maybe some things happened to me, maybe around the people I loved, but I looked at what I do have now versus what I don't have. I feel that, and like you said, you read that book, The Hurried Life. I still have yet to buy it. But urgency is huge. I feel like urgency in when I do support groups is one of the fundamental steps when people are. I feel anyone can talk themselves out of anything or talk themselves into something.
Right.
Trust me, I've seen it in many different ways. So letting people pause. One of the coping skills I tell people is to write, journal. I journal myself. I remember when I was in the church, I became an elder first time. I was like just basic. I used to write when I was struggling. I would write what I was praying to God in my journal, and then I would write what I think God would respond. It was a crazy thing. I did that for 6 months. It was it was really revealing, because I remember when I was struggling with some of the trauma, my therapist would have me sit there and talk to the trauma or the situation that I was going through, and then I had to switch seats. There's this therapist that actually coined it. I think it's Eastern Europe, that you actually sit in the person that maybe caused the trauma, and then I will have to speak from his perspective why that happened. And it was an exercise of just releasing, letting go. It's not like it's correct, but there's this
Just a way
this idea of letting go. I one thing I told Sebastian when I was a kid, my dad was an Adventist when I was young. I went to primary, and what threw me off, Chantal and Sebastian, I didn't know stuff because my family didn't talk about the Bible. And then unfortunately the primary teacher called me out on me. I didn't know about Jonah, and I didn't want to be in there. I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel like that was my family. It took me a long years, 30 years later, and here I am. But it's because there was a safe place, and that's kind of funny how family has to work that way. If you're gonna make a mistake, it should be within your family. That's a safe place. And me and Sebastian talk about church should, and we hope to make that a safe place. If the young people are going to make a mistake in the in the church. Perfect. I say that in my groups, just continue coming. Because the thing is, I feel with family, it's like Albert Einstein says, intelligence is not knowing stuff. Intelligence is the ability to change, adapt to change. That's it. So the one constant is change in our lives. I just look at this past year. Crazy. From a year ago today, I had to make a lot of choices, and I had to be unapologetic. I'll tell you one thing. My mom, I love her to death. I love my dad, but they saw me when I was at my worst, and they still saw me at that. So when I was making these big decisions moving forward, I couldn't answer 50 questions. I could not. I just did. Me and Joanna had to maybe unapologetic but loving.
Mhm.
Some tough decisions to make, but I am super blessed because that allowed me to set the boundaries that was needed for us to grow closer and move forward like we did.
Yeah.
Family is vital to. I want to kind of last kind of thread of question I have for both you and Chantal is being married for several years now. Was it three?
Yep.
3 years. In reflection and the context of wellness, how do you see the topic now when you talk about family? It's been a couple years. How do you see it now versus before? Why do you think it's important, especially today? And how would you what have you seen worked in your church or people around you, and what hasn't worked? So it's a loaded question. Answer what you can.
Sebastian, I'll defer to him.
No, you
Okay.
go.
I said you go.
Please start again.
Please,
No,
Sebastian.
please. You go, her. Ladies first.
So I think with that question, different family looks differently depending on the culture as well. That's something that we kind of didn't talk about, but that also is very important. Family is going to look a particular way because of whether, like, we come from a Latin context, like a Hispanic Latin context. And so family is very involved in a lot of things, in a lot of decision making. And it was taking the time earlier on to be like, okay, we want this much family involvement. Like, we're going to call our parents regularly, have them visit them. Like, it's not going to be like, we're not going to be a part of you anymore. Like, we're our own family unit. We do our own thing. No, it wasn't like that at all. But I know other families where they're close to their family and they eat Sabbath on Saturday, or they eat regularly a lunch every week, and they always have to spend time with each other, and that looks different. And so I think first and foremost, it was selecting what our family unit was going to look like. A second thing was because we kind of live far away from our immediate family, it was choosing people that will then be our selected family.
I see.
Our selected home. I think that for me, I think there was 2 other points in there. What were the last 2 points in the question?
Well, basically, like, what have you seen worked, not only in your family unit, but we didn't touch on so much culture, but at the same time, what you have seen in church. We're talking about all types of family, and people are struggling because they could be in a room and they feel low. They could be with their family and hate it. So I don't know, from what have you seen worked in your own experience?
I think worked for me is a mixture of the things that I was saying before, like the more classic, like, call my mother regularly. Like, today she called me, she's like, you need to call me more. I was like, okay, sorry. But I know that when I call her and keep in contact with her regularly, that I feel a little bit of fulfillment in my heart, because I feel like I'm a part of her. She is a part of me. And also trying to be like Sebastian and being more intentional with the family and with the friends that were really close at a time, and establishing that they were pivotal to me, and they were monumental in the way that they treated me and loved me. And because, like you said, Robert, we need to also think about the fact that they might hurt us, but occasionally when we feel safe, and I feel like I think about this a lot. It's like, what you're doing can feel like it's a little toxic or a little bit on the harmful side, but I still want to demonstrate a characteristic from myself onto you that I would like for you to demonstrate to me. And that is loving you as my family member, no matter what. If it hurt my feeling or not.
Intentionality is very key. And, creating those boundaries is key. Knowing what room, how much, I used to say too much family. It's true. You could have too much family if you're not careful. And we talked about, you could not set boundaries. You could be always chasing to appease a certain unrealistic ideal as a family member, but it's always this balance. I just like how you guys had that conversation before, and you guys are working through it as a team, and that's a wonderful thing that I'm finding in the marriage, is that you have that team aspect. Sebastian, anything you want to?
No, I agree with everything. Chantal kind of summarized it all. So. But the question was more of what worked, right? What functions?
Yeah, what worked? What have you seen? And you being a pastor, you may have some other insight with your church family, because this is uniquely different this year. We used to have all these things like singing things, all the things we used to do. How do you manage all that in your head? How do you still stay connected? We're talking about all families.
Right.
Oh, that's Sister Small.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I've noticed, and then I'll tell you two things that work, but the biggest thing that I noticed at this time is that the need for physical connection, right? I mean, we've done some events where it's just people coming together. Like we had a movie night yesterday. We had a couple movie nights with the church and drive-in movie nights, and just the fact of being in the same place as someone that obviously there's already relationships with a lot of people, but just people they're craving that, especially when you've been home all day, you've been working from home, you've been on your computer. There's no real, it's connection, but it's not real physical connection where I can hear you, I can hear you breathing, I can touch you, right? Obviously from a distance now and whatnot, but that has been really crucial and very important for me to see, like, man, okay, people just want to be with others. And two things that have worked, I think, to be able to create that family dynamic. I think one of them is shared interests or hobbies, right? So, and I speak that, for example, I'm a part of a city league when I play soccer. And so that I've been able to make some friends that I probably wouldn't have met other ways, right? Because if we don't work in the same place, we really have any connections between families, right? Or friends, right? Like that are between us or whatever. And so I think hobbies are great, or shared interests, right? The church would be a shared interest where you would come together and you meet someone. We've had a couple of new people coming to our church, right? Recently moving out of state, moving to here. And either they're from the same faith, or they're moving in and saying, hey, look, I'm interested here in this community, what you guys have. And so we're interested in the same thing, right? And that, at least in that sense, getting closer to God, serving others, being active, and that just creates, the more time you spend with someone, the more you talk, you hear their stories, right? Like we're talking, right? Hear other people's stories, that you begin to create a bond that, you look back, if we were to look back at a lot of our friends that we have, that, if one change may have resulted in dramatic changes, right? We probably maybe have not been the same friends, right? If one of my best friends wouldn't have moved to where we lived or been so close, we probably wouldn't have hung out as much, and then we became roommates. He almost didn't go there, and so it's just little things like that would have changed drastically what we live. And so I said share hobbies and interests would be big, and the other one I just forgot. So I'm just gonna pick that one.
Okay. Just wrapping things up, I just want to leave you with this one quote and just one sentence for each one of you. Okay. What are your thoughts on this? It's right here. It says, it's from Jack Canfield. It says, everything you want is on the other side of fear. Everything you want is on the other side of fear.
Wow. What do you think?
2 words. No, I just feel like for me, family can be scary, but at the same time, they can be the most rewarding things in our lives. Connections are a risk. No, you can't avoid that. But it's one of the biggest growing experiences in our lives. We got to put ourselves out there, because if we try to build up walls, we may be avoiding some painful situations, but we're avoiding a lot of joy, a lot of love, a lot of happiness.
Yeah.
So
that is a very interesting perspective that you bring, stating that, because we know kind of more of a biblical context that you have love and then you have fear, and like perfect love can cast, like push
Yeah.
that fear that you have
Yeah.
away, especially if you determine, right, like we talked about intentionality, determine it in your heart to be loving towards that individual, that fear could also go away. So everything is over that side of fear, right?
Yes.
Pushing away that fear with love, I think, is what my sentence would be.
Yeah. How about you, Sebastian?
I was trying to make a cool, catchy slogan for fear, but I feel like
Well,
everything
Nelson Mandela said it this way: "Let's make our choices out of hope, not fear."
Yeah,
That's one of the things that I really
turn it around. Yeah, see this. A lot of times we get stuck in our heads, right? And especially now being in quarantined and stuff, it's really easy to get stuck in our heads and say, "I'm afraid," But most of the time, life obviously life is tough and rough, but there are some bright spots, and really, I mean, we need people to journey with us, right? Because there's gonna be days where you can't, the load you're trying to carry, you can't carry, and so.
Yeah, and I just want to, those who are listening, I just want to encourage you to, there's always something to be grateful for. This holiday season might be rough, but there's something you can be thankful for today. I do encourage you to stretch your mind, think about what that may be, and remind yourself that that I've seen, at least my experience, that you could do a lot more healing thinking about what you do have versus what you don't have. I just want to say thank you to Chantal and Sebastian for joining us today so much.
No, thank you, Robert. Thank you for the invitation.
I want to remind the listeners that to stay updated with Revive Ministries through all the various platforms, but the main one is ReviveMinistriesFL.com. This is goodbye from Revive Ministry Podcast. For now, leaving you with this last quote: "You cannot protect yourself from sadness without protecting yourself from happiness." Jonathan Safran Fro.